I have to de-stress my body. So I don't like, yeah. But I got voted. I got voted. Just sit on the front row.
Oh, okay. It's up to you. I'll move up there.
Okay. It's on the very far.
6:12 p.m. Let's call this meeting to order. Before we have the pledge of allegiance and a moment of silence, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Dr. Neal for a few statements.
Good evening, members of the community, members of the board, Mr. President. Nights like tonight are very difficult evenings for our community and communities around the United States. And as such, with the actions of horror and challenge of Uvalde, Texas, I'd like to take a moment and ask everyone to stand and designate a moment of silence to the 8 students that have lost their lives and 2 adults. Please, the board president. May their souls rest in peace.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call vote. Mrs. Secretary.
Austin. Aye. Lehman. Patterson. Aye. President.
Aye. Do I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
Actually, Mr. President, I would like to
Okay. What would you like to vote?
There were 2 things that I would like to remove from the agenda. Under paragraph 7, paragraph E, cancel July regular Board of Education meeting. I would move to remove that, and then I would then make a second motion to strike under paragraph 8, subparagraph E, civil disobedience for Sylvanus Board of Education.
Could you explain why you want to cancel the regular board meeting or cancel?
Well, Mr. President, as you know, as we get further down the agenda here, we are going to be talking about the process of taking applications and appointing a new director to the board. I know we have a busy month of June in front of us, and I just want to leave open for now the possibility that perhaps we might need to meet in July to take care of the business of the board. But perhaps we might not need to, and maybe we could make that decision later, but I just think it's a little premature right now.
Was there any other comment?
I was just curious, does it have to be an actual board meeting? Or can it be a special board meeting that does not require the staff in the same way that it would if it was a board meeting? Many of our staff have probably already made summer plans, and it's a vacation month for the district. And so to ask them to come and utilize their own time to facilitate a board meeting that we may or may not have, I think is a lot to ask for our staff. I think if we needed to extend the process of appointing a new board member past the month of June, we could probably do that in a special meeting.
No, and I'm not asking that staff be here necessarily. There's nothing in the law that requires particular participation of staff to do that. I'm just saying, the law does distinguish between regular meetings and special meetings. I'm just anticipating perhaps there might be a regular meeting and we can make it as stripped down as possible. The only people that have to be there is the four board members, which is that's what public notice. And if we need to be taught how to open or lock the door or make sure that something's posted, I'm sure we could figure out a way to do that.
Is there anything that you would, I have a question. Is there anything that you would think we could not do at a special board meeting that would require us having a regular meeting?
I mean, I'm not anything in particular. I just am thinking that there's a possibility that with the new director, we might need to have a meeting in July. So I just think we should hold off on definitely canceling this and revoking meetings in July until we have a little bit more information.
When I first thought about it, I did not, I was thinking, we don't want staff to do that, and who have to come in. That would be my biggest concern. If we could do it without staff, no staff would have to be there unless they wanted to. Is there a way to do that?
Well, I would just go ahead and just restate, but with some clarity. I think we probably don't realize how much we're busy. And just even having this aired live on YouTube right now is a case of point. There's probably more that happens in these board meetings behind the scenes to prepare to make this happen than we realize. I just want to protect the staff from having, from any staff member, including our superintendent, including our secretary, to assist with in the role. And so, and besides, quite frankly, I think we need. And I don't know if there's anything that would happen in July that couldn't happen in August.
Well, I have another thing. I have a health issue that I was planning around that we picked up that evening. For July. First. Okay. But I don't know what I can say.
I just want to keep open the possibility that this board hosts a forum of this board might come together in July.
But we can call a special meeting at any time. And that is correct. Where staff would not have to be here. Except for like all the things that Chris just said.
I don't think there's a ton of distinction in terms of the background of this board first meeting between the regular meeting and the special meeting. The microphone, like all that sort of stuff is there for every meeting when it's every special. With agenda items that involve preparation by other leaders and executive staff, which is normally on a regular meeting, that would eliminate that sort of burden on staff. And that, I'm not saying we should have a meeting and make people out there cancel their vacation or anything like that. I'm saying we probably shouldn't foreclose the possibility of a small, bare bones, the days kind of meeting. If we're going to have a new director come in, then it's going to be a big meeting. It's going to be done. So,
Mr. Patterson, do you have anything you want to say?
I think we're premature. I was looking at the minutes for last June's, board meeting, and that's when they decided to not have a July meeting. I think it's premature that we don't know what people's business is gonna be. And maybe perhaps we'll have more board meetings in June, I don't know, but I think it's premature to make that decision now. I think we should make it open until at least June's board meeting.
I would be willing to do that, leave it open until June 14th. Rather than make the decision now. If I had to make the decision now, I would say that I don't want, personally, I agree, if something needs to be done, it needs to be done. If it's an emergency, it's an emergency. But I would rather fill up June rather than cut into July.
And so since the motion was made to change the agenda, I say go ahead and go through. Since the motion was made to change the agenda, to cancel, the cancellation of the July regular board meeting, I say we go ahead and make that decision. Because people are making plans, you're making plans, I'm making plans, we're all making plans for the same. And I think that it would just be best if we make that decision. Then I'm opposed to it. I want to change the agenda. I want to change the second part of the agenda, the civil disobedience or syllabus discussion. Let's take that off.
Let's have a motion for that one.
I have to bring your motion separately. So let's table the July thing for now. Let's take up the motion to, sorry, Mayor, may I clarify? Table the motion, table the July discussion.
Yes.
We can take up the motion to strike the civil obedience reference from the agenda. And my comment in support of that is, I did request materials, I think all the syllabus, course materials, course objectives about that course. That was based on an email that was released in a core request that we were all copied on, where the teacher for that course confirmed that he had been teaching the 1619 project in the civil disobedience course. At the time, I didn't know anything about the course, whether it was high school or middle school. So I asked the superintendent for those materials. I believe that about 2 weeks ago. I didn't receive any materials or response until yesterday when we got notification from the board secretary that there were some additional materials to look at in preparation for the meeting. And that's when I discovered it was some documents related to the civil disobedience course, and that course was put on the agenda. So, let me be clear, I didn't request that anything about the civil disobedience course be placed on the agenda for discussions and for action. It wasn't involved in the setting of the agenda, so I don't know how it got on there. I'm presuming it was a discussion between the superintendent and the board president. And then an email was disseminated amongst our high school staff today that wrongly implied that the teacher of the civil disobedience course was under some sort of targeted, focus of this board. That's not the case. And one can certainly appreciate, it was sent by the WPEA president. One can certainly appreciate the WPEA president wanting to support a teacher if it felt that teacher was coming into the crosshairs of the board. But that was not, and never was the case. I think it's a bit of overkill to put something like that on the agenda and unnecessarily stir up fear and tension simply because an individual director requested some information about class. That is well within the bounds of our proper authority. I don't think that we have to make people afraid to think that somebody's being targeted just so I can find out what's being taught in the class and which school is being taught. So, in light of everything being a little overwhelming, I don't think that there was any appetite by this board to discuss and take action on this matter. So I don't think there's any need for it to remain on the agenda to give it a little more time. So that's why I would move to remove it from the agenda.
With that motion, I just want to clarify something, that it was a misunderstanding on my part, that, and I'm the one who ended up putting it on there. I apologize for doing that, it shouldn't have gone on. So we have a motion on the table to remove that. Roll call vote.
Austin. Lima.
Aye.
Patterson. Rustenberg.
Aye. We still have a motion on the table about, in regard to removing, canceling the July regular Board of Education meeting. I don't see, when I first thought about it, I thought, well, let's leave the option to have it on there, and then hearing other reasons why, I'm thinking that either we push it off to the July meeting so that we know, or as it has been done in the past, or what Mr. Austin said, let's decide right now, because I'm gonna make plans for July anyway.
Pardon my interruption, the live stream audience could use a little bit more microphone from members of the board.
Do we have any further discussion on this? Or would somebody like to advance a motion? Wait, we already have one on the table to remove it.
It sounds like the super, I'm leading it.
Well, I'm leaning in just to say, the lady that sits at the end of the table that is consumed by most of her time and overtime, may be generous of the board to ask Kelly what her thoughts are.
Sure.
Kelly, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Handle, of course. Well, typically it's a good time for everyone to take a rest. I know historically that's how it's been. It's really up to you guys as the city board, what you guys determine that you need to do, but you always do have that option if you cancel it today. You add a special meeting.
Right. And I would just say I would never presume to impose on, anybody's previously scheduled vacations and things like that. I'm just thinking, I know that we have had work sessions where you haven't been present. And, usually Mr. Austin is good enough to fill in on that. But if Mr. Austin couldn't be present, then another person could hopefully be trained to do the duties sufficient under law. So just saying, keeping in mind that I'm fully cognizant and this board is fully cognizant of the people make plans and things like that. My motion is simply, let's wait until we get a new director in place, which we hope is going to be pretty soon, and then maybe take up in June, like, okay, we don't see the need to have any meetings in July. So my motion will just stand as just strike that from the agenda for tonight. I'm not saying definitely have a meeting in July, definitely ruin everybody's plans or anything like that, just strike that from the.
Was it a strike or was it a table till the June meeting, to clarify?
Well, it can always be added in the other agenda, the same remove it from tonight's agenda.
I would like to decide tonight whether or not we're going to have it. I would like to decide whether to add a meeting to June, if necessary, to the end of June. I already have plans. I would rather do that than.
There's already June 22nd email schedule.
Yeah. The more I think about it, the less I personally want to have on. Just the more I think about it.
Okay. Hearing from Mr. Austin and Ms. Russell, I will withdraw that motion. And then I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as previously amended.
We have a second.
Second.
Mrs. Kelly.
Austin.
Aye.
Killian.
Aye.
Patterson. Aye. Russell.
Aye.
May I personally thank the board for the time off in July.
Okay, Board of Education and Dr. Neal, opening remarks, please.
I have none this evening. I've already spoken for the tragedy involvement.
I have some. So, please, really fast. I was not able to attend the meeting confer on Tuesday. And my job as a deputy district attorney, that's my regular, we call it docket day, but it's the day that I have to be in court all day in front of the judge handling the criminal cases assigned to me. So that's why I wasn't present for that. I do understand it was pretty fruitful, and I heard positive things. I was very excited to hear. I'm sure our friend Mr. Brevetto would have been excited to hear that there were such good developments and good conversations. So I look forward to what's going to come from that. And hopefully it will include increases to teacher pay, because that is something that Mr. Brevetto and I advocated for. And I'm sad he's not here to continue with that, but I will continue to advocate that I hope what's going on in Meet and Confer will lead to teacher pay raises. I think that's a critical thing. The other thing I wanted to mention was that in light of obviously what we're all thinking and feeling about what happened in Texas, I did earlier this morning send an email to the board president and superintendent asking that if it's possible to have a discussion with law enforcement, like our new chief, the Little Park Police Department, about the protections we provide for our schools, and whether, in light of the fact that there is a new chief, and we're always interested in maintaining maximum protection for our kids and our staff, whether there's any further discussion and things that we can do. I'll just be candid myself that I know we don't have a school resource officer stationed at every school. I'm sure there's very good reasons for that. Obviously they all get paid. But that's something that I'd be interested in hearing discussion amongst the board with input from our staff and from law enforcement. Is there anything more that we can do? Are there any ideas that were previously considered and rejected that now might be time to look at again, or are there any new ideas considering changes in law enforcement, changes in board membership, changes in superintendent, that sort of thing? The final thing I would just like to comment on is tangential to the civil disobedience course. It was extremely informative to see those materials. And one of the things that several of us campaigned on was increasing transparency. And I think many of us are aware that there are a lot of movement in our own legislature as well as other state legislatures about how can we promote transparency to our community and to our families about course materials and things like that. And so I would ask that we engage an appropriate time, maybe in June, maybe in July, about increasing transparency by providing the sorts of materials that were provided to the board in advance on this class for other classes, putting course materials or objectives or putting teaching materials online in some fashion, so that it promotes transparency to all of our parents and all of our community, and to anybody who's interested in what's being taught in the Little Park School District. So, thank you.
I would like to thank Dr. Neal for his hard work and Brian and the admin staff for crunching the numbers and to be able to give the teachers the raise that they so well deserve. And I know Brian is going to talk about the budget later, so I won't steal his thunder, but and I was reading the minutes from April 13th meeting, and you know, I have to say, hats off to Gary for tasking the superintendent with that. I'm sure, superintendent had those intentions, but I just want to make sure that Gary, though he's no longer with us, that he's the one that pushed for the raises, and I just want to say thank you, Gary.
I do want to say something. The first, I like what happened with the meet and confer. I thought that was a great time to sit and listen to the concerns of the teachers, the administration, the dialogue, the productive dialogue that we had. It was very good. And that we would take positive steps to rebuild a bridge between the board of directors and the association here at the school. That, you know, first and foremost, that we live peacefully with each other. And I look forward to doing that, to come to an understanding with Nate, and that we will work towards positive change going forward. So it was very productive. I learned a lot about the hearts of the people here. So, thank you.
Mr. President, I apologize, I'm remiss on my comment. Maybe my brain's a little tired tonight, but I wanted to say just one word about Mr. Gustafson, who has now been approved by this board for his retirement. And his many years of
I never
service.
approved that.
Actually, we'll approve that.
We'll approve that on consent calendar in just a minute, but as there's been your moment to pull Mr. Gustafson's name off of the consent agenda has now passed. Brian, I just wanted to say thank you to you and your wife for your many years of service to the district. I know we will have moments of celebration and some fun gifts to give you, both gag gifts and real gifts, as you transition on. More than 2 decades of service to the district is phenomenal. And I just, for those in the room that have gotten to know you on a personal level, and my pleasure of doing so over the last year, truly impeccable character. And we're about to see his, what would I say, your final performance, over the next couple weeks. But I would encourage the board to give Brian a hand and members of the community for his years of service to the district.
Mr. Austin. Okay. At this time, we will take public comment.
What about 4A? Community
Well, thank you.
Sorry about that. We are excited to hear our students tonight.
Yes, we are.
That's kind of how we want to start our meetings out. So please, if you wouldn't mind joining us with the microphone. We have 2 students coming, I believe. 1 student coming, I believe. And the floor is yours. And I know the microphone can be scary, but I am going to ask you to do the microphone so that members of the public can hear you on the audio live stream.
Okay, so my name is Michaela Newcomb, and I'm currently a junior at WPHS. This fall, I will be executive president of the student council at WPHS as well. I want to speak today to share my thoughts and opinions on the standards-based grading at the high school. Briefly, for those of you who don't know what standards-based grading is, it's a grading system that we use at the high school. The system is not like standard grading systems that many of us know today, which is on an A, B, C, D, F scale. In standards-based grading, students are graded on a 0 to 4 scale. Typically, students will start each semester doing 2.0 projects, which earns them a C. As the semester goes on, students will be given many opportunities to do 3 to 4.0 level work. This work demonstrates proficiency and understanding of the content that we learn in class. To compare standards-based grading to normal grades, an A is all 3 to 4 level work, 2.5s are considered Bs, and anything under a 2 is considered a not yet. A not yet is equivalent to a D or F. As stated previously, there are many opportunities to raise your grade in your classes. In every standards-based class, there's no limit to the amount of times we get to review work and improve our grades. My freshman year, standards-based grading began at our school. At first, I was upset about the grading system because I was no longer able to get easy A's. I now had to work very hard in all my classes in order to earn the grades that I wanted. Even though I was upset, I knew this was what I needed to further my education. I've come to love standards-based grading because it pushes me to do my best. Even when I don't do well on a test the first time, there are other opportunities to make up for undesired scores, and I can simply redo my work. Also, I really like how we can get 4.0s in our classes. To earn an A, you need to have a 3. But if you get a 4, it allows cushion in your grades because your score is average. So for instance, if I got 2 on a test and 4 on a project, the scores will average to a 3, and I'll still have an A, which is really awesome, I believe. I want to make it clear that everyone earning 4s are high achieving, and it's very hard to do. As students, we have to go above and beyond the expectations set forth on a project or test to include harder concepts that might not even be taught in class in order to earn that cushion, to say. Overall, I believe that standards-based grading has improved the high school and myself because of the expectations that it sets. I have been taught to be resilient, learned to become an advocate for my learning, learned to work hard in every one of my classes, and have been able to be super proud of my grades because I put a lot of hard work into getting the grade that I want. Of course, not every student will get the grade that they want, nor take the opportunity to improve their grade. However, when a student utilizes their resources and opportunities given to them, this grading system allows students to reach their goals and their potential. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All right, now, public comment.
Mr. President, we have 9 individuals this evening to speak on public comment. 4 of those individuals are on the civil disobedience course. You're, of course, welcome as a public to speak on that topic. However, as it has been removed from the agenda, you may no longer feel necessary to do so. I'll call on your name. You'll have your 5 minutes of public comment if you wish. If you don't wish, then you don't have to come up. So I'll just move on to the next name if that's what you find. Either way, I'm just illustrating that fact. First item on deck.
Well, I was gonna read something
Yes, sir.
about public comment.
I apologize, oversteps.
Thank you, sir. Public comment, please be aware that any personal or individual student matters are considered confidential under Colorado law. And it is out of respect of that law and our employees and students that we require those discussions take place privately in executive session. It is requested that individual comments be limited to 5 minutes or a total of 20 minutes for a particular topic. The intent of public comment is to give the Board of Education the opportunity to hear your comments. However, the board will make no decision or take no action on public comments during the meeting. Now, I would also like to say, before we start the public comment, that when I read through and found out more information about the civil disobedience class, and that it was for the upperclassmen, I thought it is a great expression of our First Amendment rights to debate things and sensitive subjects that are going on in our society today. And when I found out more about it, I said, boy, this, that we can actually, without hesitation, debate both sides of things like this. So in regard to that, I at first I thought, oh my goodness, what is this? And then, it takes time to find things out. And I think that we all expressed that from time to time. So, anyway, I want to express again my apologies for putting it on the board, on the agenda. So I guess that's something. So, Mr. Superintendent, sir.
We have Morgan, and I see two names on here, Lindsay, but public comments are normally limited to one person. Is one or the other of you would like to speak on behalf of the other, or would you like to speak separately? Okay, that's fine. Whoever wants to. So. And is this Cheyenne? Thank you. After Cheyenne, Morgan, you're obviously welcome to join for the next public comment. I've got Bode Wolin after that, and Matthew Golowski on deck.
Although we know this topic has been striked, we, as students in WPHS, believe this deserves to be spoken about. Parker J. Palmer once said, "Teaching, like any truly human activity, emerges from one's inwardness for better or worse. This is a value held by our civil disobedience teacher, as evident by a poster hanging in his classroom with this exact quote. We believe that this phrase perfectly exemplifies who he is as a teacher. Being in his classroom for the past 3 years has been more than rewarding, as students have been blessed to get to know such an engaging, lovable, and respectful teacher. There is nothing more reassuring than a teacher who supports and guides their students. He unbiasedly educates us. Our civil disobedience teacher has created one of the most productive environments in our school. As students in his class, we have been given a rare opportunity to be free of judgment and ridicule when speaking our opinion. He has allowed us to feel heard."
In civil disobedience, we are asked about what it takes to make societal change. Well, our civil disobedience teacher is quoted as saying it only takes a few people in the community trying to do the right thing. So that is why we are here today. If any of you sat in for just one of his classes, you would find it is far from the narrative you've been advertised by a member of the Woodland Park community, whether you believe it or not. You would experience a classroom filled with fruitful discussions and informative lectures. The topic of civil disobedience is very difficult to balance, but our teacher does it with ease. There is no one more fit to teach this class than the man that already is, and I can assure you that everyone in that class agrees with that statement. We look up to him as a teacher, mentor, and role model. No attempt to minimize his impact will diminish our support.
We have Bode Wolin, Matthew Golowski, and then Jeanne Hingram.
Is there anything item that you want to say?
I'm sorry.
I thought that was my name, and you might have been mispronouncing it.
Please correct me at any point. I need all the help I can get.
But maybe it wasn't, maybe it's someone else, there are so many people here with good ideas. So I could be totally wrong.
Well, I'm reading it. Thank you. Thanks for all the help. So I've got Bode, and then I've got Matthew Golowski, and then Jeanne Hingram.
Is that Jeannie Hyam?
Jeanne, you are so correct. If somebody wants to give me another cup of coffee, I can stand for that.
Well, I was just, since I secretly have the floor, I just want to say, these two students just are exemplary.
I would agree.
Examples of what Woodland Park High School does.
I would Cody, thank you for your patience on my pronunciation as well this evening.
It's Cody, by the way.
Yes, I just corrected myself, so.
So I know this topic is straight off the agenda, but I can't help but feel that a lot of our classes with controversial subjects we're debating are threatened. And so without further ado, just under a month ago, I took my final for AP Human Geography in this room. If you haven't reviewed this amazing class already, AP Hug is a year-long course that gives you unbiased, unpolitical, and unopinionated education on everything in the world and how it relates to us as humans. What is extremely important about this class is that we are taught about cultures other than our own, ethnicity and race, war and peace, and everything in between. As students at WPHS, we are given the option to take not only this class, but many others along the lines of how humans behave in our history. There's nothing more important than being taught unbiased information about human history, as if we are not taught history, it will repeat itself. One of these spectacular classes that gives us, as young teens who will someday be in control of our planet, a viewpoint above our own isolated mind is civil disobedience. Civil disobedience is not just a class at WPHS, but it is an action. The action of civil disobedience is to willingly break or not follow a specific law as it is not just in the mind of the person not following it. Let me be clear. Civil disobedience as a class does not encourage children to break laws. The purpose of this class is to educate children from a non-biased standpoint on historical movements such as sit-ins, walkouts, and other movements of justice against topics such as racism, sexism, and discrimination of other people or taking away rights. It is not used to teach division or community, as what this class is accused of. Without classes and subjects such as these in our schools across America, history will repeat itself. And allow me to explain. If the young people are not taught about our mistakes, our racism, and our problems as a country, the problems will continue to get worse. If we ignore subjects taught in this class, if we review this class to just drastically change it or silence it, students will not have access to intellectual thinking, and they will be suppressing their own education, and they'll not be given accurate facts about the world we live in. The decision is made eventually to cancel this class or others like it. You, the majority non-diverse board who refuses to seek understanding and lies about what is going on in our schools, are taking the education of kids away from the district in which you serve. Consider expanding your viewpoint and realizing that teachers are not our enemies. Teachers teach us. They teach us what we need to know. Now let me speak about a few examples of what civil disobedience in the United States of America is and why it is so important to educate students about. Number one, the Selma March. The 54-mile march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama occurred on March 7, 1965 through March 21st. This was caused by the obstruction of African Americans in the right to vote, the murder of Jimmy Lee Jackson, and these marchers, black and white, were met with police on the Edmund Pettus Bridge with tear gas, horses, and blockades, even though it was rightful and peaceful to have the march. 4 lives were lost to hate. Number 2, the Little Rock Nine. After ruling of segregation in schools as unconstitutional in Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, 9 black students sought to test if this would be met with peace. On September 4th, 1957, they were blocked by the Arkansas governor from entering the formerly segregated white Central High School, even though it was completely legal for them to attend. When they were granted access, they were met with violence and hate speech, but persisted. Number 3, Freedom Riders. In 1961, several groups of white and black activists boarded buses in our nation's capital with the goal to protest bus terminal and bus segregation and to end in New Orleans. On almost every stop, though desegregation was illegal at the time, they were met with violence and smoke and entrapment. 3 men died. Over 460 people participated in these riots. It may be important to you to try and keep your power and silence this class, but to me and to us as students, it is important that we learn about our history so the stripping of human rights does not occur again in our country, and so we can strive to be a better nation. I have been to every one of the above sites mentioned on a road trip to my bar mitzvah, as I care about our country and its future. And so I ask of you, Board of Education, to consider the power and freedoms this class gives to kids like myself. We need classes like this and teachers as epic as the ones who choose it, to teach it, to stay heard so we can thrive as young citizens. This class is not about plotting anything. This class does not encourage violence. This class does not promote breaking the law. This class promotes freedom and liberty and the First Amendment and our rights as Americans to be productive civilians. We must move forward as nations and rectify our mistakes, and classes like this will help. You as a board are always stating that you give kids and parents a choice in this district, but if you decide to silence a class, you're actually taking away from our choice. As a rural district, we have so much opportunity, especially in high school, and we're so incredibly lucky for that. And to change or take away classes like this is, and I'll say it again, taking away our education and restricting the choice you say exists. I'm up here today on bravery I shouldn't have to muster. I shouldn't have to be arguing to keep a class or protect a class to protect my education. That is just so sad. However, I'm not about barriers that divide our schools and walls that divide our community, so feel free to contact me to have civil conversations from a student's perspective. Thank you, Cody.
Thank you, Bodie, for your comments, and apologies for the mispronunciation of your name. The floor is yours next, after Matthew, please.
Hi, I'm Matt Gulowski. You guys know me by now. I'm a parent in this district, and as you know, I'd prefer not to be here tonight getting caught up in all these garbage. But when the people in charge of my daughter's school are acting unprofessionally, unethically, and even illegally, better believe I'm going to be here. Let's hope we move through this so I can spend more time with my family. And so I communicated with most of you by email previously. I like email. It creates a public record for everyone to view. I don't like when our elected officials keep secrets from the public. That's not how I operate. The last week, I received an email from a member of this board that I found incredibly unprofessional and hostile. So I thought it best that I show up today and talk to the board in person. I wanted to show that individual that I am not someone who can be bullied into silence. I do not work for this board. You work for us, all of us. Please do not forget that. So let's get to the matter at hand, though. I do support charter schools. I do not support a body of elected officials who feel like they don't have to follow the rules. I think you know that about me by now. Charter school law has a clear process to follow if a district wants to let a charter school use some of its vacant or underused space. And I don't know the motivations of the people who wrote that law, and I won't pretend to, but I do know that one consequence of this law is it created a framework to enable competition for that unused space. And competition allows the district to know that they're getting the best deal possible. I'm not opposed to putting that space to use. Let's get a good deal. The law lays out a process where the district identifies vacant or underused space and it seeks applications from people interested in putting that space to use. It does not require the district to only use that space for charter schools. By ignoring this process, we cannot know if Merritt would be the best tenant for any available space in this district. Is Pikes Peak Community College interested in bringing some classes up here and maybe renting out a couple of rooms? We don't know. Is Karis interested in expanding their offering of classes and renting a couple of rooms? We don't know. Are there daycare centers in town which could offer increased services to our community if we only had a couple more rooms? We don't know. Are there other charter schools interested in some space in our district that might be a better fit than Merritt? We don't know. And to that point, we can't know, because if there are new charter schools that want to start up, they are not allowed to tell the district right now. They're not allowed to submit a letter of intent until August 1st. We don't know who out there wants to use this space. By ignoring the process in the law, you're essentially going into a no-bid deal with Merritt Academy. Such a deal cannot be seen to be in the best interest of the district, not when you haven't opened this up to competition. Ronald Reagan once said, "Free enterprise is a rough and competitive game. It is a hell of a lot better than a government monopoly." By ignoring existing charter school law and not seeking competitive bids for underused space in this district, you are absolutely guilty of promoting a government monopoly, especially when two board members are on record as wanting this Merritt lease to be for 5 years instead of for more customary 2. Where are your so-called conservative values?
I'm going to mispronounce his name again. Name, if you would mind, please. Jenny Hyam, thank you. I just read it wrong, and this is my own fault. I'm so sorry. Well, I can do better. I'll work on it. Sam Peck will be after.
Dr. Neal, Sam had to go to Columbine for the concert, so she wondered if she could be bumped down.
Yes, ma'am. Kirsty, you will be after that as well.
She's gone.
All right, my name is Jimmy.
Can you pull the mic down, please?
How are you?
Thank you.
All right. My name is Jimmy Hyam. I retired from Woodland Park District 20 years ago this month. Teacher of the Year in 1990-91. I didn't shy away from controversial topics. I was always an advocate for the students and teachers in those years. I spent a few years as president of WPEA too, an office which was reluctantly passed around in those times. David Graff was one of my students. I remember David as being, actually, all right. No, I was just going to say, it was the same years that Brian Gustafson was a student there. But that, I'm sorry to say, Brian, I cut that because I had to stay for 40 minutes. And he had, for the courses I was teaching, I believe he was in Bruce Marr's classroom, a wonderful teacher who was fond of me. Anyway, I remember David as being a somewhat quiet student, always very thoughtful. He spoke when he had something to say. He was in my sociology class. It was either his junior or his senior year. I was particularly impressed with how absolutely respectful and open he was to the views and attitudes of other students. Frankly, it's not that much of a common trait among high school boys, in my experience. It is, however, a dream for teachers who want to have open discussion about controversial topics, particularly the topic of civil disobedience. I could draw out other students with David's always non-confrontational, never overly opinionated comments. That is what makes for truly productive critical thinking discussions. In 2015, David, along with other members of the English department, worked to develop courses that were targeted to improve the reading comprehension of nonfiction texts, raise test scores, and also be higher interest than traditional English electives. One of the results was Civil Disobedience, Literature and Freedom, a gift for the students' families and even our community. And I'm quoting from the description, this district description. Students will explore a variety of texts, from plays to prose to speeches, that revolve around the themes of freedom and equality. The student will be able to connect the relationship between critically reading text to build knowledge and producing writing to convey knowledge. And I think we could hear how successful that is from the students that spoke tonight, actually. Even more so with a gifted teacher such as David Graff. Courses such as this are the ones that students remember. These are the courses where the topics are brought home for discussion over the dinner table. And I would add, it is exactly these courses that people find me after 15 years on Facebook and say, this happened and I remember your class. And so that's a gift from Facebook, which I don't think is much a gift to us in general. I expect this has been a popular course and that there would be a lot of objections to discontinuing it. These are the discussions I wanted around our dinner table with our daughters. In fact, they are exactly the discussions we had around our dinner table. This is the result of effective critical thinking in school. This happens with catalysts such as David Graff and courses such as this one on civil disobedience. Thank you.
We have Kirsty Rogers. After that will be Kitten Walker. And then Tia Alvar.
My name is Kirsty Rogers, parents of 2 students at WPSD. I'm here to express my concern that I don't see a public forum scheduled to discuss the potential of a lease agreement between Merritt Academy and Woodland Park School District, whereby Merritt will occupy space in the middle school this upcoming 22-23 school year. I am requesting of the board that you provide an opportunity for people in our community to be seen and heard. On March 30th, you offered a Q&A on this topic, but at that time, the vast majority of the public's questions were answered with, "We don't know at this time." Since then, new information has come to light, and there has been no forum in which we have been allowed to pose questions or discuss it. On May 4th, there was a board work session where Cooperative Strategies presented a feasibility study on this proposition. Around May 17th, not sure exact date, the results of a survey regarding facilities master planning were posted to our website. 787 people took this survey, and there's a lot of information to be studied, including that when considering renovations, less than 5% of respondents prioritize creating charter spaces, And when selecting an option for sharing space, only 6% chose sharing space with a charter when allowed to select 2 options. These are not conclusions, just examples of data that should be considered. People have questions and legitimate concerns about information from the feasibility study as well, to include inequitable occupancy rates, too high an occupancy rate for WPSD, unrealistic construction timelines for an August 1st start, omissions from the study to include HVAC and traffic considerations, and very significantly forcing district families into a situation they are not ready for. This will result in division and loss. Please take the time to listen to our concerns and listen to understand. When you voted to approve the contract with Merit Academy on May 19th, I heard you say that some people thought the contract process was rushed and some people felt it was too slow. In regards to this lease agreement, however, I can't imagine that anyone would dispute that you are rushing this process. One of the concerns of the DAC was that the contract favored the assumption that a lease agreement was a foregone conclusion. With your yes vote, you expressed to us that this should no longer be a concern to us, that it was resolved. Yet, we now have a publicly released email from May 11th, that's before the charter contract was voted up, an email from Director Illingworth to only President Rusterholz and Director Patterson titled Lease. My first question is, why was Director Austin excluded from this email? It is my understanding that you are mandated to act as an entire board. How is this appropriate? How is it appropriate that neither of the recipients rectified this exclusion of Director Austin? I don't know if this is unlawful, but it feels so very wrong to me. In the body of the email, Director Illingworth writes, quote, after consideration of the draft lease facilities agreement, I would ask you to have the attorney update the term from 2 years to 5 years so that it's the same length as the length of the charter, end quote. My second question is, why are the 3 of you having discussion about the extension of a lease agreement that we were assured was not a foregone conclusion? And my third question is, how does this request for a 5-year agreement protect Woodland Park School District? Merit stated enrollment projections are such that they will outgrow this space after 2 years. So extending the term to 5 years does not make sense to me, even if 5 years is the length of the charter. Please slow down. Please behave ethically. Please allow time for people to be sincerely heard. At the public hearing, Merit assured us that they have other facility options for the 22-23 school year.
1 minute.
Please, I implore you, take the time the community needs to develop a healthy relationship between schools. By choosing to keep my children in WPSD, I chose consistency and stability for my family. Please don't take that choice away from me by forcing this lease agreement before it's time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Malcolm. Okay, so Kim Walker, I live here in Woodland Park, and I didn't know what I was going to talk about until a few minutes ago. But first I'm going to start with a prayer. So Heavenly Father, I thank you in Jesus' name that you are here among us. I thank you, Lord, that we are a city on a hill. We are the salt of the world. And I thank you, Lord, that your word says that we shall know the truth, and the truth shall set us free. In Jesus' name, amen. So, we shall know the truth, and the truth shall set us free. It is the truth that we know that sets us free. I would like to recommend that when you are reviewing curriculum
that you get the hard copy of the teacher's manual and you look at that hard copy of the teacher's manual. I know from experience that teacher's manuals are put online, but they are not complete. So again, I recommend that you get the hard copy of the teacher's manual and you look through that. The other thing I would like to address is the teacher's pay. As a 20-year teacher, I started in 2000, actually, okay, I started in 1998, making $20,000 a year. Last week, some friends and I were looking on the Woodland Park website at the teacher's pay. If it is accurate, the starting teacher here in Woodland Park gets paid $34,000 a year. That is not a living wage. In 1998, I was making $20,000 a year. $34,000 is not a living wage. So as you are looking at pay raises, I highly recommend that you pay these teachers as much as you possibly can. As a teacher, we have so many bosses. Our parents are our bosses. The school board is our boss. The superintendent is our boss. Our principal is our boss. Our assistant principal. We have more bosses than any other profession. It is a difficult job. We have more responsibility than any other profession. It is a difficult job. So, I'm going to say something that is not going to be received well. If the teachers union has negotiated a $34,000 starting pay, the teachers union is not a good union.
That's right.
So board, I am asking that you go above and beyond what the teachers union asks. These teachers deserve it. They deserve to have a living wage. So, thank you for your time.
Tina, Nate, and then is Sam back in the room?
He is not. Oh, he's not on the sheet.
Okay, she'll be in good time.
I'm Tina Elbar. I've been here in Woodland Park for over 35 years. I get kids and nieces and stuff go to school here, and they were always very good. I'm in real estate, and the biggest thing when I had customers looking to move to Woodland Park, it was because of the schools. Academically, Woodland Park schools were top of the state. They were very good. We've seen that decline. And with the start of the Merritt Charter School, I was at that last meeting when they were discussing the charter school. Wasn't that involved with it, but I will say that the people that came up and expressed concerns about the charter school and what they stood for, I think everything was answered by Merritt Charter School. They gave the answers, they had the documentation. I was mostly impressed with the test scores of their students. The increase of students from below level going to way above level was amazing. They are doing something right. And I think they need a place here. I don't have a problem with them getting a lease with the school, using unused space at this time. It not only helps the taxpayers because we're recovering some of that expense of unused space.
The fact that we're losing students every single year says something about the education system. Something is lacking. People are pulling their kids out of school. And why? And for me, I was happy to hear the gentleman say that he wants to put new curriculums online so that parents and people that are concerned with what children are being taught can see what's going on. I tried to check out a kindergarten book just to see what they're teaching or how it's going. I don't know there's no new Common Core math. I can't help my grandkids. So I thought maybe looking at some of the school books, textbooks, and see what is actually being taught. I have a group of people that want to read through all these books to see what's going on in schools. Yes, students do like what they're being taught. They like the teachers. They like the curriculum. But as adults, we need to see that the curriculum and what's being taught is good. It's good for the nation, it's good for the country, and it's good for the students. So if you do opt and vote, I hope you do make all that stuff available online so that we could review it and see it and make good judgment on what's been going on in the schools. There's some things that have happened at the high school that I was a lot of people were not very impressed with. You know, the artwork that goes on and the stuff that's going on. I am appalled at some of that would be going on in the school. So transparency is huge. And I think in this day and age, a lot of parents, a lot of grandparents want to know what's going on. And if you do put that online, I think it would be a great thing for the school district. And I do want to thank the board for addressing all these issues and going forward with the agendas that we have and trying to correct things that aren't working. And that's what we need to do.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Mr. McGowan, are you still here? Thank you, sir. And Sam Peck will be our last speaker, if possible, if not. Okay, great.
Good evening. First off, my name is Nate Owens. I am a little bit under the weather, so you'll have to forgive me as I speak, but I will let you know that I do speak from my heart. I am a teacher for the school district for the past 10 years. I'm a math teacher, I teach physics, I teach engineering, I teach students. I have recently been nominated and accepted the position of the WPEA president as a representative of our teachers. I have exactly been on this job for 1 month and 25 days. So you'll have to forgive me because I've received no formal training in how to negotiate this new landscape for myself, along with the public speaking aspect of things. I tend to be solutions orientated, and I like to I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I want to help others. That's why I became a teacher. So I'm here on behalf of myself, and I guess I speak for myself. And so I wanted to reach out with my sincerest apologies. I have written an email this morning. I have written a follow-up email, and I'd like to provide some clarity to that. I want you and everybody to know that that I truly had and still have no ill intentions towards any sort of process that may have been pursued. The process of the proceedings for tonight, I'd like to make the intent known that I have no ill will towards our board members. I have no intent towards the district, no ill intent towards the school district or any singular member of our school district. And so I humbly come before you guys and would like to let you know that from the bottom of my heart, I have no ill intent. I'd like to provide some clarification. In the first email that I had sent this morning, I had noticed on the agenda for tonight that there was 2 discussions around our civil disobedience course. And so I am going to read, I sent an email to the high school staff because this is a high school course. You heard from Eugenie that this course has been developed by our English department staff. The entirety of 6 staff members together came together and looked at the standards that were set by Colorado State Education, and all 6 teachers had input into this course. Since the inception of this course, there's been 1 teacher that has taught this course. I wanted to let you know I did not see that as an attack on the teacher. I'll read my email here in a second, but I had every intent of inviting the high school staff to find out more information about what is being said, what is going on, how the discussion can be a good thing, how it can be a negative thing. Whatever is being said, I wanted my fellow colleagues to be able to listen to what was being spoken about this course. I wrote in my email this morning, tonight, I quote, tonight is a board meeting that has an agenda item regarding discussion around our high school class civil disobedience. I would encourage you to attend tonight's meeting and show support for our colleague and all the hard work and value that he has put into creating this class. I know that I will be there in support, and I hope to see you there as well. I hope that those words showed no ill intent. I was not anticipating an attack. In fact, it was very encouraged by our meeting for a process that's gone over for the past couple of weeks. I was able to have conversations with a couple of our board members during the meeting. I'm a huge proponent of working together, building that bridge, reunifying our district, our teachers, our staff, our administration team, our board of directors. I want us to work together. I want us to do things well, because when we do things together, that's when things happen well. I replied to that with a follow-up email to the staff. And I want to clarify, and I quote, I would like to provide some clarification to the email I sent earlier about the board meeting. Please understand that this is not a request from WPEA, nor a call to arms against any of the Board of Education members. I send this as a personal request that we can support our colleague by simply being there for him. It was not my intention to show force, to show a call of action, which may disrupt the educational process or any of the proceedings at the official school board meeting. My sincerest apologies. And so, I really want to work together with this board. I know that some of my executive staff on the WPEA has also expressed this as well, that we want to work in collaboration, because together we can do things better. I'm going to leave you guys on through the Meet and Confer process. We've had a lot of open dialogue, and Mr. Russell, you alluded to this earlier.
Okay.
Thank you. We have a lot of room for growth, but we have made so much progress so far, even in the past couple of weeks. Like I said, I've only been in my position to represent the staff of Woodland Park for a total of 1 month and 25 days. And my goal is to create opportunities so that we can have open dialogue and open communication between the board of directors and the teachers. So thank you for your time.
name is Samantha Kruger-Peck. You might recognize it. It's on the recall notice form that you received today. I could be here today to speak as a taxpayer for the money you've wasted our community. I could be here as a parent for the fact that you behaved in a way that makes my student feel less valued than others. I could be here as a citizen for the fact that you continue to break the law that a judge has instructed you not to. But instead today I am here as a businesswoman to talk about the civil disobedience course. No matter how you moved it off the agenda, the email still states from one board member to another. Residents have loudly and clearly repeatedly voiced that they do not want this in our schools. Well, I'm here to tell you that is not true. I speak on behalf of many parents and as citizens in this community that disagree with you. When I sit down with clients and prospects in this community, CEOs, CFOs, COOs, and I ask them, what do you want in a hire and how do you want to retain talent? They repeatedly say the same things to me. We want team players. We want problem solvers. We want people who can give and receive difficult feedback in an empathetic and understanding way to help unite our team. We want people who can talk about difficult topics. We want people who understand perspectives different than their own. We want people that can read, learn, and understand opposition and be open-minded about other perspectives. But what I don't hear these people say is that they want single-minded hires that only believe in their viewpoints and aren't willing to read or study things that are controversial. You are doing a huge injustice to our district by even bringing this topic up and not honoring the teacher that has put time and effort into making our students better for our community. If anything, we need more classes like this. And honestly, if you as a board took this class, maybe our community wouldn't be so divided. What I worry about is if you as members honestly believe that this course doesn't bring value, I worry for you as parents, as leaders, and as role models. But I'll tell you what I'll never have to worry about, that my kid will lose a job to yours.
Mr. President?
That is the end. Yes, sir. At this time, we will move on to the information discussion, preliminary budget, and schedule.
Actually, if I could, just, we need an approval of the consent.
When we approved the agenda, did we not approve the consent? Okay. Okay. So, thank you, Mr. Austin. At this time, I would like a motion to approve our consent agenda. So moved. Got a second? Second. Roll call.
Austin.
Aye.
Miller.
Aye.
Patterson. Aye. President.
Aye. Now, we'll move on to information discussion.
I got some floor is yours.
First, I want to say wholeheartedly a thank you to all of you. I'm really honored and humbled by the recognition, so thank you very much. And I'll just share part of a conversation I had earlier today. I was talking with a gentleman who asked me to talk about your career path in education. And so as I was going through it, there was a realization that every step that I have made so far along my path in education, there was somebody in this district that was kind of pushing me or pulling me that next step. Hey, Ryan, I know you're teaching golf to the superintendent and the athletic director, but you ought to be a teacher. Okay, I'll be a teacher. And hey, Brian, we need somebody to step in as an athletic director. You ought to step in as an athletic. Okay. Hey, we need somebody to step in as the budget guy and director of business services. Okay. And so as I realized, man, I've been blessed to be here and surrounded by so many people that saw maybe in me what I didn't see at the time. So Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to share that too. Now, sleep, because we're talking about the budget. This, so board members, you have on your desks and in your packet, a proposed budget submitted to you today. I'm not going to go through the whole budget. We're not really using this as the budget public hearing. I want to highlight a few things, kind of talk about our process a little bit, and then you've got a couple weeks to review, generate questions, and this budget will be available for inspection on our website tomorrow or in my office if you want to see a paper copy. But then you have an opportunity to review, generate questions, come up with thoughts, the things that we talked about on June 8th. That will be the budget public hearing. Also, I know, though I'm not in the meet and confer process now, I know from previous experience that there are agreed upon talking points coming out of there prior to ratification of the process. And so I'm not going to address anything regarding those points because I frankly don't know them. And so what I appreciate about that process is that then the district, the WPA staff will ratify those items. Then I'll be able to share more in-depth detail on it. All right, so the board, as I mentioned, you have the document. I want to point out a couple, just a few things. This is not the full document. I will add the narrative in a couple weeks once we really make sure we have all the numbers dialed in. And so I'll tie that in. So really what we've added for you to review is the public notice first. The public notice is what's being published in the Courier within 10 days of this being presented to you. So it's going to be in the Courier next Wednesday and then again on June 8th. And I'll put this on our website as well. It just says, hey, anybody has access to this document, you can get it from me and I will also put it on the website. It is the proposed budget for next fiscal year 23. If you look at what is labeled as page 13, it's not the 13th page, it's just labeled as page 13. And that's, it's got the assessed valuation on there, board members. And just know, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this. This is where I'll start to identify where we're basing our conversations in our revenue is on expected assessed valuation for next year, expected mill levies for next year. And so as you look at that, please, and I guess Dr. Neal, maybe the questions will go to you if there are questions that come in about the budget. Please forward questions to Dr. Neal and they'll get to me. Okay. So what you should have in there pages 13 through 26. And those are the actual budget pages for the general fund and all the other funds. We have a couple sub funds and then we have a pupil agency activity fund. I'm going to talk more about those. You should also have a proposed draft appropriation resolution and a proposed draft specific budget resolution. Okay, so you've got all that. Now I'm going to step out and talk a little bit more high level so you don't have to dig into the numbers right now. Just talk about our process and kind of what we're talking about dollars. So I know, cardinal mistake, right? Give you the handout. I'm trying to teach you stuff. We'll focus the attention here, and this is what I've got up here is captured in the document. So in our proposed total appropriation, we're looking at 7 funds. Primarily, our operating fund is the general fund, and we're allocating just over $32.5 million in the general fund. The risk management fund is a sub-fund of the general fund, and so next November, when the auditor is here and droning on about fund balance and things like that, those 2 funds will be combined. The food service fund is a separate business, basically. We contract out with Chartwell's Dining Services, and we're allocating about $1.3 million there. Now, we are still in the process of selecting a new food service provider for next year, potentially a new one. We've received 2 bids for that business, and we'll have that decision made next week. The grants fund is, as it sounds, that holds all of the designated purpose grants that are provided to the district and then specified for how they're used. The pupil activity fund, we commonly refer to that as our internal accounts at the schools. Those are cash accounts and fundraising, fees that are maybe outside of the scope of the general fund that come in for like science class or the high-speed field trip. Those things fall in the pupil activity fund. The transportation fund is one we're required to have because we collect a transportation fee, but we pay for transportation out of both the general fund and that fund. And then the new one at the bottom, I want to make sure to point out, we're going to add a capital projects fund next year. Okay, and this is going to be an allocation from the general fund and established in line with what we'll be receiving in the next month or so with our facilities master planning process. And the whole idea behind that process is to help the district prioritize projects in the next 1 to 10 years. And what it will say is that, well, you need to have about $4.5 million in here. We can't really do that. But what we are going to do is allocate $2 million. And about 300,000 of that is coming from a different funding source. But that will be a new fund in the budget and specifically targeted for a lot of Mr. Tuttle's work and the maintenance staff and custodial staffs for facilities upgrades and renovations and improvements. Okay, I talked about these. I'm not going to go into them additionally, unless board members, you have questions. It's important to understand the assumptions that we're working under when building this budget. Right now, as I pointed out on that page identified as number 13, we're basing this budget on the assessed valuation of the district most recently received in December. And we received this information from the Colorado Department of Education. They get it from actuaries and folks in the Joint Budget Committee, and they make projections on what our AV might be. They have undershot our assessed valuation here for a number of years. And the projection for next year is lower than our assessed valuation here this year. So I'm not going with their projection. I'm going with our current. I'm assuming it will be higher. I don't have any reason to expect that our AV will drop, especially in 2022. So that's one of the assumptions. Excuse me. Another assumption is that our funded pupil count for the district will be 2,279.5 students, and this will be over 6 schools, including a charter school, and also based on 5-year average. So it's going to be important to note that we're still working through with CDE on this 5-year averaging with adding a charter school in. Likely what will happen is for the calculation, we'll take the Merit Academy projected funded pupil count for next year and add it to the previous 4 years of counts for our existing district to prevent the district from losing that 5-year averaging by having a bump in 214 pupils next year. So it will maintain that averaging. It's important to know we count pupils 3 ways. Head count, that's actual, like everybody sitting in here, that's 1 person. Funded or FTE every year, and that starts to modify head count into some decimals, I guess. I don't know, maybe 0.5 homeschool student, or this student is only 0.5, and so then we get a smaller number than the head count, and then the 5-year average, which takes 4 years plus our current, and averages them together, and funds us really for students that we don't have, and it's a cushion for declining enrollment districts. So that's good for us. With that number, we are 175.2 students higher than this year, but again, that's with adding a school projected to be at 314. Our per pupil rate throughout the district, we're projecting to be just over $9,100. I think that's a significant increase over this year, 446. The other, and this is an extremely complicated formula, many of the other assumptions are based on House Bill 1390, which is the School Finance Act. So they run numbers for us, and we use those for our calculations, including those of the budget stabilization factor, which is also called the negative factor. And the state of Colorado has decided to buy that down a little bit this year, meaning reduce its negative impact on our district, which is a good thing, to the tune of about $358,000. And of course, the assumption, and we know we have a contract for a new charter school in August. So these are kind of the big five that are impacting the budget for next year. So how do we make money? It's really easy. Well, it's not. We call it the total program or formula funding. Okay, that's the main source. Go back to that's the main source of funding. I'm going to talk mostly about that. That's in our general fund. Okay, on top of that, this is on top of the district, as you know, we receive sales tax revenue from the city of Woodland Park, mill levy override revenue from property taxes here in Woodland Park, reimbursements for transportation from the Forest Service, Medicaid, etc. So money we spend comes back to us a year later in a lot of ways, portions of it. And then we have a lot of other revenue, participation fees for athletics and activities, facility rentals, some investments. So that's kind of how we make money. If I go to that total program, that formula funding, ultimately it comes down to number of pupils times that $9,120. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Okay, but there are a whole bunch of other factors that change this number for every district throughout the state. So I want to talk about basically briefly what those factors are, but know that ultimately number of kids times dollars per kid. These other factors, okay, get added on top of $7,478. Remember I said we expect to receive $9,120. So these other factors add on a significant amount of money for each pupil. And that's the cost of living. So the state of Colorado does analysis of all of the districts and quantifies the cost of living factor. Okay? And all of these were pretty vanilla here in Woodland Park. We're kind of in the middle on a lot of this. There's a personnel factor. More students you have, more personnel you have, the higher that factor is. There's a size factor. The smaller your district is, more money you get for the size factor. These kind of offset each other sometimes. There's an at-risk factor, the number of pupils in your district that are identified as at risk based on free and reduced meal price eligibility. Certainly there's been talk about that in this last year because the United States Department of Agriculture waived all meals in the National School Lunch Program. And we've done that for a couple of years now. Okay, so there hasn't been as much incentive for folks to apply for free and reduced price meal benefits. I think the USDA recognizes that, CDE recognizes that. I don't believe there will really be penalties for our low numbers this year. I believe we'll start looking in the years 1920 when considering reimbursements and calculations for at-risk. Because we know that as we get in the next year and we have to start charging for meals again and fees, that we will have more free and reduced applications, and that will be restored to a more typical level. We're usually at about 34% of our district population considered at risk. And there are different funding mechanisms and factors for online students, but right for us, since we don't have a designated online school, they are funded at the current pupil rate. And then I already talked about the budget stabilization or negative factor. Okay, that's the factor that can offset all the other factors. Okay, so that was added in 2011. If the state economy is not great, they can make the changes here. We're fortunate next year that the state of Colorado is buying that down with the hopes of maybe getting that back to zero sometime soon. Okay, so we've talked about this. Talked about it last week, certainly. The declining enrollment trend in the district over a number of years, a couple of decades. And what does that look like as we get into the funded pupil count? The 5 green bars, they represent the current 5 Woodland Park School District schools from fiscal year 18 through this year, fiscal year 22. And these are our funded pupil numbers. It's important to understand that in fiscal year 19, we didn't get a whole lot of new students in. What we received was more funding for kindergartners. We had previously only been funded partial funding for kindergartners. And that changed in 19, so that bumped up our funded pupil count. Okay, in fiscal year 23, next year, the number I shared already, that's being added on to by the addition of another student. Okay, so when you look back in history at these times, those are the anomaly years, fiscal year 19 and 23, that changed kind of the consistency of the funded pupil count in the district. So let's look forward. Let's take that gray bar, fiscal year 23, look forward, okay, but also do what I mentioned earlier, add that 314 students from Merit Academy into the district for this year. Okay, and you still see a declining enrollment trend, okay, based on projections from our demographers, from Merit Academy. We still see that trend. So we have to have this in mind as we're thinking about building this budget, not only for next year, but for the years down the road. And it's still something that the district is going to have to navigate. And you can see the inverse trend with per pupil funding. It's really tanked after 2011 for a couple of years, and then we've really seen this grow as the state has been able to address the negative factor of the budget stabilization factor. The COVID drop, and that's where we got pretty tight with our budget and our spending. And I think that, while difficult, it's going to help us next year, and certainly, it's helped us this year and will help us next year. And we can see that trend hopefully continues to rise. Unfortunately, per pupil funding is tied to inflation, and next year's inflation rate in our formula is 3.5%. So the formula runs at about 18 months behind per school. So in fiscal year 24, if the state opts to fund inflation plus growth, then we might see that 8% increase on per pupil rate for the inflation we're experiencing right now. And so there's always that lag, which is tough. And this year is a year where a lot of school districts are going to try and kind of get ahead or catch up to that in some unique ways. But just know that we're only receiving revenue for 3.5% inflation. After next year, we'll see what the projections are. Okay. Just to illustrate the budget stabilization factor impact, since fiscal year 2011, the district has now realized $27.2 million of revenue from the current public school finance plan. Okay, that's tough. That's tough. And fortunately, we're seeing fiscal year 20, it started to narrow. COVID year got a little wider, started to narrow. And as we add another school, we still have the budget stabilization factor on top, and they're working to buy that down. But as the economy shifts and changes, just know that there are a lot of factors out there that impact us that we have little control over here, whether it's corrections or highways or however the state needs to allocate these budgets. Okay, so just some quick numbers. That total program, we expect to be just under $21 million. Of that, the local share is over $9.6 million. Property tax and specific ownership tax. The SO tax is tax that we receive from our taxpayers that buy cars and license plates, pay their registration fees, things like that. And then, because the formula is designed for local property taxes to fund our schools, and the local property taxes cannot meet that amount that's in the formula, the state must equalize and provide funding to backfill. And the state equalization share, we expect to be about $11.7 million next year. On top of the formula funding, we do, as we've talked about, we see mill levy override revenues, sales tax, et cetera. But I want to point out the graph that kind of shows how our revenues split up. If you look, the state has to provide almost half of our revenue due to the formula. And every year in the legislation, they try and figure out, somebody's trying to figure out what's a new and better formula for school funding. It's so complicated that it makes little traction into it. But maybe down the road, we can get that hashed out. The state, 45% is pretty typical. We're almost 50-50 each year, state and local. We're actually going a little bit above that with the increase in sales tax revenue over the last couple of years and what we project next year, where local funding without sales tax would be 38%. Local funding with sales tax gets out to 52%. So that's how we make money. I'm going to talk a little about how we spend it, open it up to some of your questions, and then give you a couple weeks to review. Then we'll talk more specific numbers. So how we spend, these are what we call objects in our budget. And they're the kind of the big categories. And the biggest one is in compensation, salaries and benefits. And frankly, I expected that to be a little bit higher for next year, but we were moving some money out of reserves and into some supplies and equipment accounts that kind of held that number back a little bit. And that's fine. Most districts are in this about 75 to 80% range of spending their budget on salaries and benefits. We, you can see, spend about 11% on services that we purchase from providers, 7% on supplies, and then equipment, property, that's really capital expenditures. I would expect that to continue to grow as we get into our facilities prioritization plan. And as we dial into that even a little bit deeper into what we call programs, that word gets used a lot in school finance, unfortunately. These programs are really the more specific categories of how we spend money. And as you can see, about half of our budget is on direct instruction. Okay, so if you look at instructional programming, those in the classroom, teachers, staff, directly working with kids. As you look, you can go across a multitude of different programs, special education, 11% of what we spend goes on special education, about 5% transportation, student support services here in purple. That's another layer removed from instruction. And it's your counselors and those kinds of folks and those services that they provide. So this gives you an idea how these all break down. And this is pretty typical year after year of our percentages. About half is in direct support of instruction. And I will say, as the district, maybe down the road, engages in some strategic planning, some updates there, okay, this is where, if are advising fiscally, you really try and focus on how do we put nuts and bolts behind our plan in these kinds of categories. You know, how does this start to reflect the district's strategic plan? And right now, we're focused on certainly academic success and educator talent, social and emotional growth. We have a lot of grant funds to help us with that, and communication. Those are the pillars of the strategic plan right now that we try and direct this funding to.
Brian, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, just because of that page. So the 48% for instructional and then the 11% for special education, would you pair those? I mean, is the special education wedge of the pie in support of the instructional piece, or is it in addition?
A portion of it can be paired.
Okay.
Because there is students, full-time students are going to generate the same revenue. I know we don't like to talk about students as revenue, but that is kind of odd. But there's additional flow-through funding for special education students, and that comes through our BOCES in the form of some state funding, CEA, and IDEA funding, that's federal funding. So there's some on-top funding. And because of that, it's in its own program. So there's some that you could add in, and kind of say it's the same, and then there's a little bit on top. Okay. So as we look overall, what do we expect to spend next year? And you can see in the proposed budget column here in the middle, the dollars that we expect to spend. It's not all of what I showed you was appropriated, because there's what we call fund balance or reserves. And we appropriate those, they're available, but we don't anticipate spending all of it. We hope to have at least 120 days of reserves at any one time. We're well above that right now, coming out of the pandemic. And so we hope to address that a little bit and make sure we're spending those funds. We expect to spend just over $32.2 million next year. And what does the budget calendar look like? Well, we'll learn a little bit more about the assessed valuation levels in the district in August. And then we know that our pupil membership count is October 1st. And that's when really all of this starts to get some traction. And we decide as a district to revise or amend the budget mid-year. And then we'll finalize the assessed valuation and mill levy certification in December. One of the first things that you did as a board. This when you were sworn in. Then in January, you still have the opportunity to revise the budget. We did not do that this year, but I would recommend doing that next year, especially with the uncertainty around enrollment, adding another school, the dynamics of the economy, et cetera. And then next winter, begin the process all over again. By May 31st, really have to present a proposed budget to the board. And then this June 8th, we'll have our public meeting, public information, dives a little bit more into the actual document, and then make it available for adoption. And that will be your determination whether you want to do that June 8th after the public meeting or June 22nd in a special meeting. We've done it different ways. Not July, because if we go to July, great point. If we go to July, it's not legal. And this has to be done by June 30th. And so what happens if we don't adopt a budget by June 30th, we'll revert to 80% of this year's allocation. Okay. So just get it back. July 1st starts the new fiscal year, and then we go on. Now, what questions do you have for the members?
Right. So did we get like just a lot better funding from the state legislature this year and like their sort of buy down of the budget stabilization factors? Sounds like it's sort of a heavy contributor to what looks like a lot better per pupil funding for next year.
Yeah, primarily for us, it's the buy down of the budget stabilization factor. That's the big chunk. Unfortunately, we don't have the enrollment growth to really benefit forward from it. It really kind of equalized what we expected to lose, kind of in a net neutral position. But that's the big change for us this year.
And then you had a cool chart that was showing like the gap between budget stabilization factor and our funding,
our program.
And so when you mentioned FY23, there's so much. I guess that looks like great news if I'm understanding everything. To see the closest it's been in 10 years, 12, 11 years.
Correct. It's the smallest since its inception.
And so I attribute that to the way the state legislature is funding things for one thing, but you did mention the new school. Does the new charter school help us in that regard in some fashion?
Not really. The budget stabilization factor will reduce what the new charter school makes in per pupil funding, just like the existing funding. Really, it now just gets spread across six schools. So the number of pupils goes up by adding a school times the same per pupil rate. And the budget stabilization factor is a percent of the total program. So it actually gets to be a bigger number dollars wise, but it's the same percent over the new funding. If that makes sense.
Well, I don't know if anybody really makes, other than yourself, I suppose, it really makes sense in the budget stabilization factor for that. I appreciate you trying that improvement.
What other questions do you have?
Right, is the 45% that the state contributes with the mill levy override. Remember we had to sign, is that gonna go down continually and the levy override gonna increase? Because isn't it the state's agenda to come back down to zero, or we've got so many years to pay that off?
Really good question. Let's look at, sorry for scrolling. If you look in your packets, or I'll have it up here as well, at page 13, this is our projection for next year. And it shows the previous 4 years of assessed valuation and certified millage. Okay, right here, this column, it's a little confusing because this is the 2021 assessed valuation, where my pointer is, of $334 million. In October of 2021, our 5-year average pupil count was 2,104.3 students. And then down here, the collection year for that, for our certification right now, 2022, those are the mills that we currently have certified that property owners are paying taxes on, 27.572 mills. That general fund mill levy, so your question is 23.55. That is required to go up by 1 mill per year until that gets to 27. Right? So next year, it has to be 24.55. And then we'll get till 27, and then that's when statutorily it's frozen, unless something new changes toward new legislation. So yeah, we are in year 1 of that required increase. So next year, that would, all other things being the same as far as assessed valuation, that would take us to 28.572 mils. But that will change based on the AD.
And then will that bring the state funding?
Yeah, that is the design, is to increase local share and decrease state share.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. One other thing I forgot to mention, so I was saying things. It is cool looking out here and seeing former mentors and former teachers of mine when I was here, former students, and I love to be lumped in with Mr. Graff as a classmate. I'm a little older, and tremendous colleagues. So thank you all very much.
At this time, I'm going to need to take about 5 minutes break.
Thank you.
Back here for 8.
Well, thanks for coming. Yeah, my son right here.
Not that though.
Kids have fun. They did. And we came back with as many as we left with. Perfect. Sure, we're all the same fingers. How are you?
Yeah. Me too.
I'm in the apartment right across from me because they're really cheap living. Yeah, the fourth one, West Edge. It's a half orange on it. It's right across from like the field, not the I live there because it's more like dorm land still No, absolutely. My roommate's living out. Someone in the main hallway let their dog out and had diarrhea. And no one cleaned it up. And it's been there for 3 days. That's how I live. And I do. Anywhere. I feel like you would speed it up. It's basically it's probably stronger than the other. Share with the people. So I really learned how to use the air fryer. Like if I text my bathroom has sort of one, they don't clean the kitchen. They leave their food everywhere and they're just kind of my bathroom counter plugged I wanted like high energy, maybe that's what you wear to school. That's what we should wear to school. So our students don't fall asleep after us. I'm not gonna lie, our floors are colors are really relaxing. I don't know, the counter in my room. That's the color of my counter in my room. It's horrible. I'm gonna try to cover it. That's orange. It's okay. Yeah. Oh, but it's orange. At least I'm trying to cover this up.
It hasn't changed.
You know, I'm gonna try to cover it up to someone over. I don't like I got it from Walmart. I already got 2 rolls. I will do it. I don't do it.
It is about the one to you get deemed by the IRS. It's not bad, but you make either the same decision or either way it's not going to make it. Decide to do it. There's a few things you got to do. Decide not to do it. Okay. So most stress about it. It's really about insurance. So when you fill for the year, what we'll have to do. So IRS didn't realize this was going to fall. Is that when you separate service to get retirement, that covers separating from insurance. So when you come back, you're treated as a new employee. So your insurance will end August 31st. A new employee won't get their insurance until October.
Right. So if you did the Cobra, it would cost you, I think we calculated it was $878. And then you're done with that month. And you're done.
Okay, and then if I don't?
There will be change. The penalty. That's what I found out today. We have somebody.
No, really, you mean, wait a minute, if I say no to what?
If you say no to doing the Cobra. Oh, if you say no to doing the Cobra, you just go.
What if I say no to doing the 110?
Okay, we just tear up that agreement. And go right into the contract and go on. Yeah, for sure.
But still, based on how we started off talking about it, it still makes sense to me to do 110. I know,
If it were me, I would realize that in August I'm getting a pretty decent payout for one month for you guys, to pay for 1 month of Cobra, and then double dip and then make that up.
Oh. I may not have use my personal names to supervise student teachers.
I'll check it out. I'm saying that's one way. It's still be worth it. For me. I mean, $878 for 1 month, like out hurts, like if then you're getting 2 checks for the rest of the you'll get an extra just to get you. So that line in that form, it says that's your salary, but also whatever's negotiated with audit, you're not going to miss out.
Okay, now, I know that I would need a car, but I don't know how to.
Candace is walking. Payroll. It's really
Really happy to know. I appreciate it.
So you let me know if you want to continue forward. Okay, talking about your. No?
He'll say yes.
Okay, we'll just keep going. I'll get Candace to hook up. Yeah.
Okay, we're on to, Tom Weston. Is he with us, Miles? I suppose, Director Austin. Look at the owl.
When you speak to the owl, Mr. Weston, are you online and can you hear us? Okay. Thank you, Kelly, for the dessert this evening. Members of the board, if you open your cellophane package and think it's a cookie, it's not. It actually requires quite a bit of focus. So Kelly, I've got a fork for you. Find your blood sugar needing a little bit of help. Or you could just eat it barbaric style, and like a sandwich. It's an apple pie.
Miles, should we skip ahead to?
The director D conversation would go very quickly.
Well, why don't we skip ahead to the Director D conversation while, Mr. Tuttle is getting us online. So,
Members of the board, you have received correct me, Kelly, 8 applications. 7 applications for Director D. I'm just hunting in the dark, suggesting Saturday morning I checked with Mr. Rusterholz to interview those candidates. Let me just profile what was going on with the last board process that we went through. It's your pleasure on what you would like to do, different or the same. We have a set of questions that each candidate would be asked. They come individually. The board and I sit and just kind of ask them those questions. We just round robin interview. You take your notes for each one of those candidates. At the end of the day, you compile what your thoughts are. We may talk about a rubric in the first part of the day. Actually, I back up to that. What are you looking for? What are your expectations? What are your point values? Those kinds of things. And then in the end, after about a 45-minute interview, depending on how many questions we're up to, Kelly, we're probably up to like 11 or 12 questions for each one. She's already compiled those questions, so if we're ready to produce those, then you would make the decision. Now, I don't think that all of these interviews can happen in one day. You would be about 7 hours of interviews. That's a long Saturday. But I also don't think that the board ideally could do it on a weeknight. That makes for some long weeknights as well. And so I thought the Saturday the 4th, we get through 4, 5, 6 of these. We pick up another couple on the Tuesday night after Memorial, or after that, not Memorial Day, but the weekend after. And then you'd be ready to make a decision. Pretty simple, just like a job interview.
I had proposed something to you in regard to questions. Now, as far as the times go, that, a Saturday morning, we could start on Saturday morning and see how that goes. I was going to propose that each director have questions that are important to them. Review the questions that we already have accumulated from previous boards, look at those, and if there's any questions that are particularly important to each of the directors to ask to the candidates, that we would also put those together.
So those emails and the invitation have gone out to board members to submit those questions.
So that we put together the questions that are particularly important to us. What I was hoping that I would just throw out there for suggestion for conversation. And on each question, we could do it, have a 1 to 10 scoring on each question, add up each candidate to a total score, and then also have a paragraph or description or your thoughts in general on each candidate. Originally, I was going to suggest that perhaps when we were reviewing the candidates' original application, that we would leave names off of those so that we could be more intrigued, but those went out before I could offer that suggestion. So, so does everybody understand what I'm proposing for a scoring card?
Would that be similar to the same thing?
Is that
exactly right, Tim? Yeah.
So then all we have to do is submit those questions that are important to us.
Presumably those have been done. Kelly sort of closed that down already. So if somebody has a hot question, did you get mine? Yeah, we've got the questions that were sent in. It's been about 2 weeks now.
One is not, I'm going to call that one.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start off with, there's no process whatsoever under law.
We're not saying that there is any process under law. That's correct.
Anything we do is just what we make up.
That's correct.
I haven't seen the 11 or 12 questions. So
she's compiled each of yours and she can send us.
I haven't sent anything in. I haven't seen any sort of default questions that were used by previous boards and anything like that. I would have to see that.
Well, I don't want to. Did she already send them? Kelly, did you?
I did, I was trying to find what I sent.
She sent the questions.
Getting an email that, maybe I missed it. There was a lot of emails, but I do remember getting an email that was sort of like setting out a kind of from Kelly, a kind of an idea about some steps and that there would be questions compiled. I think I was waiting on another email that was going to be like, hey, here's the questions or something, or I didn't know what we were necessarily going to do. But anyway, I haven't seen it. Maybe they're in the inbox somewhere, and the people that core my emails in a dragnet fashion every 48 hours have seen them. But I haven't read them. Anyway, I would have to do that in order to develop my own questions. And I don't know that I'm intending to submit my questions ahead of time necessarily.
Only if they would be duplicative.
Right.
Only if they would be duplicative for the other members. And so some of that organization is you all as a team coming together and say, yep, that's the same question I had. I don't need to ask that again. It's just from an organization standpoint.
You just get into,
or the morning of is fine too.
You get into legal perks because you'll get into, if we start sharing the questions, then that's going to get released in Quora, or we're going to have to set up a public meeting just to share questions with each other. So there's it's problematic to do that in a way that is legally satisfactory. But in any case, if Kelly, I'm sorry, if you did send me those questions, if you could just send them to me again and say, hey, here's what you missed the first time, that would be step one for me.
Well, and another thing that I was wanting to do is that the questions would remain confidential until the person comes into the room. I'm not suggesting that there would be gotcha questions, but
I think that very much can be done.
But the other thing is, they could be Quora, and then they would no longer be private questions.
I would have to talk to council about how that process would work.
I mean, there are sort of exemptions, but
I hear the desire of the board is to receive a fresh response from the candidate that day and not have it be a pre-planned released set of questions, is what I'm hearing the pleasure of the board.
Because we've already got the ones where they've answered questions ahead of time, and that's good, because they have a chance to think it out. But I like the impromptu, fresh ones as well.
But with that, I want to make sure that we're clear that every candidate gets the exact same questions.
Yes.
That we're not free-forming for each individual.
Absolutely.
Even if it's in real time. I just want to make sure that I'm clear that that's the expectation.
That's exactly my expectation.
So we wouldn't be allowed to ask follow-up questions to people based on certain
clarifying, but I wouldn't say that it has to be, I would say that it has to be consistent for every candidate with the possibility of clarifying questions specific to the question that was asked. And that we not custom fit our questioning for a specific candidate based on what we read in their letter of intent or what we pre-read in their written answers. So I think that consistency is going to be important.
That's probably a wise suggestion, Chris. I was gonna say, David, I gotta be honest, I'm not enthusiastic about like a scoring system for people. I just don't feel comfortable writing numbers down and saying, I think this person answered this one well or didn't answer this one well.
The board could do a ranking system as you went throughout the day and just simply rank them.
But what would you, how would you, sure, how would you?
I don't know, I mean, I'm just planning on listening to the interviews and reviewing any other materials that have been submitted and making a vote based on that. I don't know, we're gonna be winnowing down from 7 to 5 and then to 3 or how it's gonna work. But I don't know that I'm just not immediately enthusiastic about the idea of having some sort of rubric where I'm ranking fellow members of the community. And obviously that would be open in public. I don't really want to do anything that seems mean to anybody, or suggesting that just because I didn't vote for them, that it's because I've had some sort of problem with them, or it's about something they said one way or the other. So I'm not comfortable about doing that, but I guess we'd have to see what the real proposal is.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I was thinking that one idea would be we would review or interview all of the candidates, and then on that first meeting, reduce it down to 3 candidates for a return. Something along those lines. Is there any process already in place?
This is where I would rely heavily on Kelly's experience. She's been through this with other boards for many years. And there might be some suggestions that we could make to Dr. Neal for us in the way of just some protocols that can be fair and consistent.
So I'm hearing the day of the event question awareness, no pre-questions. I'm also hearing a sensitivity to the rejection factor for anybody not selected. I'm also hearing a point of first round, second round, which the board would do very well on a Saturday, kind of coming through your first round and then picking a later day of the week to have the finalists come in, that kind of thing. All of those can be done. So let me try to formulate that into an email and see if it meets your schedule requirements.
Is there anything other concerns that matters there?
Well, we already have a scheduled date, correct? Right? So.
We've agreed tentatively to the 4th.
Do we get this done before that? So, I mean, did that.
By Friday, I can send this summary out to what you've asked this evening.
David, are you sure that that we need to have sort of like a second round? I understand sort of winnowing it down in some fashion, but I mean, are you sure that we need to ask somebody to ask people to come back for like a second round of interviews? Because if we've got like 7, it's going to take 7 hours already. I mean, I'm just throwing out that we may not need to ask people to come back for more interviews.
And I believe that has not been the process in the past.
You could also choose to do that day or not.
Yeah, I mean, we could do whatever.
I was just throwing that out there, what I had envisioned to do.
You may get stuck on 1 or 2 or 3 candidates and need that time to bring them back.
Tracy, you've done this before, what do you think?
Well, if you need a ride, just do it. Understand that process. I would hope that we could get it in a day.
I thought you wanted to make it last as long as possible. That was a joke.
Kelly, I did find your email. It's sent on April 25th.
All right, I'll summarize that in an email on Friday. Mr. West, Mr. President, anything else?
No, take it away.
Mr. Weston, you have 3 minutes on the agenda. I'm kidding. Go ahead. We can't hear you.
That was a joke.
There we go. That's my. All right, so we're ready to get here.
Right, and for the sake of the community that maybe hasn't met you, would you mind just introducing yourself, Tom?
So Tom Weston here. I serve as current school liaison right now for federal school district in Capital 20, Springfield 11, Pueblo 60. From there as well. David?
Good job, Miles.
Right, so hard.
I made it worse.
Yeah. Can you hear it?
Yeah, sort of. All right, talk nice and loud, Tom.
Okay, I'm Weston here. Sorry, my voice is probably impacted by a COVID infection, but I finally ended up do my best here. The role of charter school liaison essentially what I do in all the districts for whom I work. I use my 40+ years in public education, from teacher to principal, to establish, maintain a positive relationship between charter and authorizer. That's the 30,000 foot view. So what I want to do is ensure that the authorizer is aware of and implements best practices as outlined by the National Association of Charter School Authorizers. Ensure the charter follows all statutes and follows contract. Make sure the authorizer is true to the contract that they've written. Act is kind of a two-way road between charter and authorizer to mediate any issues that might come forward. Advise both charter and the authorizer on best practices, mediate any concerns. Sometimes it's from a parent of a charter school student, and turn that back to the charter. Mediate issues between charter and authorizer. Provide an annual report on academic performance, growth, leadership, governance, and finance to the district, and also share that with the charter. So that's truly the role of the liaison, to kind of be that conduit between authorizer and the charter.
Anything else?
So Tom's purpose tonight is just come to you and say, what do you want to know? There were some questions this week, and so David and I talked about adding Tom to the agenda, and what is his role, and how does that function? He is feeling the pressure of COVID, having received COVID in the last 7 days, since we had him here 2 weeks ago. So,
Well, Tom, thank you for taking the time even when you're not feeling so well. I hope you get over this quickly.
Thank you.
Tom, I just wanted to clarify, when you are the liaison between the charter school and the WPSD, what kinds of topics will you be discussing? For instance, if is it something that would be between issues about, well, I don't even know where to start. Dr. Neal, perhaps you would have better questions, or Tom, you'd be able to get.
Well, I think we run into times where, the audit, we will use the same auditor between the district and the charter school. And so the timing of that, when is the audit done, which days, which weeks, if we have an auditor coming from out of the area and they're coming into town and it makes sense because we're already paying them, do those schedules mutually meet up? Let's say that Brian's got the auditors coming in the first or second week of October. Do they also spend time the first or second week of which month? November. Does it also make sense for that to happen at the charter school at the same time, or do they have a different cycle? So a lot of that is communication. And then some of that's negotiation a little bit too. Brian's like, hey, I need to get my audit done, and in order to do that, I need to get your audit done. And so you guys had your audit scheduled at a different time, and so that's some of the scheduling. Tom, you have probably, one of the things we talked about was a list of all of those activities. Those activities are in the hundreds of activities, right?
Right. So, for example, helping maybe remind a charter when certain reports are due. So every month that they meet a financial monthly update, that's part of their board packet that I then send to the district as part of my attendance at their board meeting and executive summary. So here's their monthly financials, their quarterly financials, when the calendar is due for the following year, when they adopt budget. Typically, most of the charters are very much on top of that, but if they need a reminder, they can. We had a case many years ago, Colorado Springs, where the charter was talking about student fees, and it morphed into basically a fee as a condition of enrollment. And I had to raise my hand and say, no, that's a violation of statute. And they weren't trying to violate statute, they just didn't know any better. And once I could tell them, no, you can't do that, here's the statute, they were great. And so you work in those ways. If there's a frustration, I try and bridge that gap. So I get a hold of Dr. Neal or the appropriate person and bring the parties together for a conversation. Once a year typically, you sit down for a couple of days and review the current contract and look ahead to the next year. And kind of mediate that conversation. If there are some issues that are in the current contract didn't work so well for either party, discuss that and see if addendums can be made to the charter contract. We kind of have that annual review as well. So it's situations like that as they come up. If there are some questions, I'm an easy point of contact for the charter principal or the executive director. A lot of times if there's a parent concern, they will call me, the parent will, just because they think our liaison is some kind of superintendent of charter schools, which isn't true. And I send that right back to the charter. So I'll get with the principal or executive director and say, here's the situation. And then just go ahead, thank you.
So, Tom, a charter school liaison, I know that that role is in the charter contract. Is that simply a contractual thing, or the charter school liaison something that's always in like the charter school laws and things like that?
It's not in statute. It's a field that's grown. I mentioned at the town of Albany tonight, when I started this 12, 13 years ago, I didn't know one other person was a charter school liaison. And suddenly the field is growing. There are certain districts with many charters who have it as a staff position. So like Denver Public Schools has dozens of people in their charter office. Douglas County has 3 or 4 people. And in my situation, I'm just an independent person working primarily with districts with 1 or 2 charters. The exception is District 11, they have 6. That was kind of a unique situation. But it provides that buffer, I guess, between authorizing a charter who's got a full-time job. And so I can assume that role, given the experience I've had in public education over 40 years.
And so, Tom, are you paid jointly by Merit Academy and school district, or how does that work?
There are different ways it can be done. Some districts take on the administrative fee that statute allows the authorizer to hold back for services. In other cases, like in Academy 20, they split it between, in this case, the 2 charters and the district. And so what I do is I break down my monthly fee. There's X amount to the district, and there's X amount to each charter. It can vary.
And so in our situation, is the Woodland Park School District have a contract with you, or do you have a contract with Merit Academy?
I have a pending contract right now with the district to start July 1st. I'm working right now on a consulting contract that ends actually the end of this month. So we have one right now that's pending that starts July 1st. It runs for 11 months because I don't bill in July because frankly nothing happens. And it's just a flat fee. And I don't know how the district has decided to break that down. If Merit's going to share that.
Merit pays 100% of the fee for Tom's services. He is contracted, in the charter contract, it describes that he has to be mutually agreed upon by both parties. Merit has expressed their willingness to contract with Tom. We've expressed our willingness to allow that, or the same, or we both agreed that Tom's the guy, and then Merit pays the fee. Okay.
And Tom, it sounds like the way you describe your duties as liaison, that it sounds kind of flexible, like it's take it as it comes, as needed. Is that fair?
Right, you can never predict what a day is going to bring. I always used to say in education, whether it's a charter or a district, especially for leaders and for school board members too, as I'm sure you found out, every day is a surprise party and you're the guest of honor. And so you never know what's going to come up.
Tom, as liaison, do you envision, would you be regularly appearing at board meetings, or is that kind of like you're talking about, just take it as it comes on with whatever the surprise party is?
Yeah, typically I would try and attend most, if not all, monthly board meetings. Because I represent work with a number of districts, there are times when I send someone else I contract with that I pay for to take notes. But we try and cover most of them, if at all possible.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions?
All right, well, thank you for being with us, Tom. Hope you're feeling better.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, at this time, I'm going to have to apologize, and I'm gonna have to leave. I spent the afternoon in the hospital. I thought I could make it the rest of the way through, but I'm gonna be taking off right now and handing this over to Mr. Vice President. So I apologize for having to leave, but I made it as long as I could.
Thank you, sir. And safe travels home next.
Mr. Garrett, is it me this time?
It is you.
It says on the paper. It says in the paper.
If you close down the house, we'll have director comments afterwards, and that's it.
You actually have two presentations back to back, so what do we do?
It's me at this point. Okay, well, you know, when I woke up in the morning, I know everybody probably does this, you think to yourself, what's gonna make a perfect day? For me, it was, A, can I follow a passionate public comment? That would be good. Can I stay late and do it when everybody's too hot and tired? That was good. And can somebody else wear a bright word shirt? And that was good. So today is a great day based on those measures. All right, so we're just gonna briefly go through the executive expectations, number 5, staff support and interactions. I will let everybody know that I'm challenged to make my presentation short. So I plan to accommodate that. That's why we're not in the auditorium like my esteemed colleagues get the privilege of being, but that's okay. All right, so in the EE5, the very first thing, the expectation is that the superintendent and the organization would promote and perform procedures, actions, and decisions which are lawful, ethical, respectful, encouraging, and dignified. It's a lot, right? And so there's a lot of different ways and systems that are set up. We're just going to highlight a few of them. And I know Brian hates this when I do this, but you know, the very first, this is Brian night, by the way. And so, you know, we always get the clean audit. We work for the number of years we've been to get that clean audit designation thanks to his team and his hard work. So that's obvious, you know, to number one, some legal and ethical practices put in place. We also have to comply with state and federal laws and regulations, and some of those things that we are mandated to follow, and some of the processes that we have would include Title IX training. So if you missed my Title IX presentation earlier in the year, come next year. So, the Title IX training, we do have to have identified staff members and identified roles. They have to be trained in a certain way, and those trainings have to be posted on our website. And thanks to Kelly, they are. And so we're compliant and making sure that those are happening. Again, a procedure that is lawful, ethical, respectful, encouraging. Mandatory reporting training. I know that the teachers that are watching here know that every year they get this wonderful slideshow from me about, hey, you have to say things to people when bad things happen. And so they work hard and they have to see it every year, but that's a yearly presentation that they sign off on to protect us legally as mandatory reporters. And we also have various hiring dismissal processes. It's not as easy as you know, somebody coming in going, I just want a job, you're hired, and then they don't get to pay your fines. We have to, there's a lot of procedures and we have to follow, including the legal background checks, the legal licensure checks, all of those pieces of already law, including even our interview processes. So those are all dictated. And then we have some procedures set up for staff grievances and complaints. And I think I want to make a distinction here for everyone in that a lot of times we hear somebody say in the filing a grievance or there's been a grievance against or I have a grievance against. In our school district or policy, the grievance is defined as an actual act, perceived act, that is a violation of a policy or regulation, something like that. It's not an upset My feelings were hurt, somebody did something bad to me, it's a grievance. The grievance is actually defined by violating policy. The complaint piece is the other piece, right? So if the complaint said, now my feelings are hurt, whatever it may be, and so we have to investigate those differently. And those are laid out clearly in policy, all the steps that need to be taken. Always trying to resolve all issues at the point of the lowest possible point of influence. So just a couple of stats on some of the grievances in Title IX, things that have happened throughout the year. So you can see we have a number of Title IX inquiries by staff members. Remember, I'm not doing a presentation on students. These numbers will be a little bit different for the students, but this is in staff. One formal Title IX inquiry. Now, somebody might ask, well, what's a formal inquiry? It's not a way to investigate that. No, in Title IX, there's different laws, and so the number of Title IX formal investigations have been 0. And what that really means is that there was a inquiry, and asking a question to figure out where this lies, and we either party can say, yeah, you know what? If the party comes in and says, I'm going to file a Title IX, or a form, they can say, you know what, I don't want action, I just want mediation. So mediation is an action, and we investigate that, follow through with that, but it's not a formal investigation. Investigation would be a complete piece. So we've had one of those this year. Number of grievances, official grievances, okay, 0. So we've had 0 grievances filed by an individual or by the association on behalf of a group of staff members or individuals. Formal complaints, we've had 6 to date, formal complaints, and the number of formal complaint investigations, 5. In other words, somebody once again said, I want to have this complaint on record, not investigated. And so that can happen as well. And then some good, in the hiring pieces, I just thought these were good to hear, just so you can kind of see that our hiring managers, our principals, supervisors work really hard to treat people with dignity and respect. So you can see the process well planned. These are people that didn't get the job that way. And so you just see, and then just really excited about that, other than it's good to hear. Our hiring managers are really working hard to make people feel qualified to meet roles. All right, the next one. We model and ensure that actions, communications, and attitudes promote the performance, autonomy, motivation, and well-being of staff. So a number of years ago, I believe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, the district made the decision to employ a staff and student wellness coach. And we provide those types of services for our staff. And some of the things that this person does, again, I'm going to focus on staff here. You can see like the walk and talk. So what this is, a staff member who just needs to get out and get some coaching. Right? It could be a problem that they're having in school, they're feeling overwhelmed with grades or behaviors in class, or maybe a problem with a colleague, whatever that's weighing them down, and not allowing them to be regulated, right? Are going to go out and get this coaching. We know that we can't regulate students unless we have regulating adults. And so a lot of that is, any kind of situation where somebody in our staff may not be feeling as regulated as they need to. So they visit with this person. You can see for the last 2 years, 292 different points of contact in this walk and talk. Now, the person who does this wanted me to point out it's not always a walk and talk, because sometimes it's icy and snowy outside. So it's just a sit and talk, but it's classified as your walk and talk. Vaccination clinics is another thing that we offer to our employees. To every year, we've had flu vaccinations come in. I think last year, or maybe it was this fall, they did bring in vaccinations for pneumonia, chickenpox, shingles, and COVID all. And so we've had 111 participants in our district to get vaccinated. We make the choice to do that. Mammograms, so we've had 39 different points of people who went and going and getting mammograms. She likes to point out that her favorite one was the mammogram on wheels. I'll just let you use your imagination and move on from there. And then the most popular one, I think everybody would agree to this, is the chair massage. Is anybody here taking advantage of that chair massage? Yeah. So these are situations where we partner with a local massage school. Yep. And they have to get contact hours and practices, so they come to offer their services for, I believe, if I'm not correct, this is like $5 a person or something that our wellness people cover. 646 different times people have taken advantage of the chair massage. I've done it twice, and I fell asleep both times, so obviously I needed the chair massage. And then one of the goals of the wellness team is to spread out so that the responsibility for staff wellness and staff well-being doesn't fall on just this one person. So she goes out and she recruits and gets our staff members to be involved to teach different classes to our staff. They staff classes. So for example, our own Joshua Smith has done guitar lessons, and that was a very popular one. It's always requested. We've had, pottery and things that people really have a passion about that they go and de-stress after work. There's been 24 different classes offered and 176 different participants in that. So these are just part of the story about what we have done to promote performance, well-being of staff, things like that. The autonomy one, that one's an interesting one in that we find our autonomy to our classroom in two ways. One is an academic freedom within the classroom, right? So we have a curriculum, and we have what we need to follow. But what we don't do is we don't dictate and script what they say, what a teacher says. There's an academic freedom to how they can improve kids or how they can, so whatever their style is, to make sure that that curriculum is addressed, they have the autonomy to do that in an academic freedom setting. The other piece of it is that they get to choose their autonomy through our educator effectiveness system, right? And so our educator effectiveness system has a part where student growth has to be measured, and our staff have the opportunity to work with their administrators, work with other people in their department or whatever to establish their growth for their particular set of students. So there's some autonomy in how they get measured on that as well. Okay, ensure an environment where staff is comfortable and welcomed to provide new ideas, discuss questions, issues, concerns. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's really long, but you guys can all read it. But definitely, that it's a communication, very channels of communication. Now, knowing that this is an executive expectation, it's really about measuring the culture in our buildings around these exact topics, around these exact premises. And then we do that by surveying our building's teacher and classified staff perception of their building leaders, knowing that those perceptions are a result of, or those actions in our buildings are a result of the culture of the district going forward, set by the executive of our district. And so in the winter, we did take everybody that's in the classroom or classified had the opportunity to take a survey about their building administration. And one of the questions was maintains open and effective lines of communication. You can see that across the district that our staff felt in their building, in their individual buildings, 78% of them felt strongly or agree that the building administration does have open and effective lines of communication. Okay, so the next one speaks a little bit to that. Again, I think this one's important because we can have open lines of communication, but sometimes our open lines of communication aren't in alignment, or what we communicate aren't in alignment, right? It might be contrary to what the other person is saying. So in this question, it was listens to the opinions contrary to those of authority. You can see 80% of our staff across the district strongly agree or agree with that. So by measuring those, using those surveys and measuring those two questions, we're able to say that, yep, you know what, there is an environment where staff is comfortable welcoming with ideas without fear, direct, indirect retaliation, with expectations being heard and considered. Provide staff with the support and resources necessary to minimize student misbehavior and classroom disruptions. Sometimes those little buggers, they can act up, ensuring a respectful and optimal environment for effective teaching and learning. So, you guys don't act up? Yeah. Again, using the same survey with direct questions across the district. Number one, provide and enforce clear structure, rules, and procedures for students. You can see across our buildings, all 5 of them, 82% of our staff feel like strongly agree or agree that their building administrators provide the structure and rules and procedures for students. And so there's a support in place that, you know what, we have these things happening in our classroom, we have these things happening in our hallways. There are systems and structures in place to support that and allow them to continue to teach. And then intercedes when issues arise. I think that's, again, you have the structures in place, you still have somebody that can see when an issue arises. So you can see in this particular case, 87% of our staff felt that our building administration were able to intercede when issues arise. Prohibit building policies or actions that may overburden staff or diminish their performance or morale. Very tough one, because all of our staff members are always overburdened just by the nature of being in this profession. It's just a lot of things that happen. And so we want to prevent building policies that add to that. Right? So one of the things that we do is we ask the perception of our building administrators again. They monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of instructional practices. So we've got to make sure that their performance and their ability to perform is monitored. And you can see 84% of our staff strongly agree that the building administrators do monitor and evaluate the effectiveness of instructional practices. And then a big one that I think is big for morale, big for personal growth and professional growth, would be that my building administrator has improved my professional practice. And you can see across the district, 80% of our staff believe that in fact, yes, our building administration helps and improves my instructional practice. And then the last one, annually assess and address any needed improvements in climate, culture, satisfaction, motivation of employees through a district-wide survey and published findings. This one's coming soon because the survey is actually currently being conducted. Probably, if those staff members are sitting that have not done that, do that. Those results will be available and posted as required. And with that, I would recommend that EE7, or excuse me, EE5 is in compliance. Members of the board, any questions on that?
Mr. Garrett, the survey that we used in this one, was that one published already?
That is a personnel survey, so that one was not a climate and culture one. So our principals got the feedback from it, but not the system.
Can you tell me more about that survey?
Again, so as part of all educator effectiveness and measuring different points of our growth as administrators, we do a checkpoint of building, teacher, and staff perception, so that we get the feedback of what's happening and be able to make adjustments. That happens twice in a year. The midpoint of the year, which is when this survey went out, not this one, number 6. That was in December, January timeframe. Followed up at the end of the year, that goes into the educator effectiveness component of the administrator.
And so that survey is given to both certified and classified staff in each building?
That is correct.
And is it mandatory that they fill it out and return it?
It is not.
So are you able to speak to what the participation rate was for staff in the survey?
I could get back to you on the exact numbers, but I would say that it's likely 75% or higher in each group.
And that survey, is it filled out anonymously by staff members?
It is.
So is there any reason that it could not be made public?
It's part of it, that part goes into the administrator's personnel educator effectiveness. So we wouldn't publish
and evaluated to the public.
Can't,
Not understanding why.
you can't legally present information of evaluative nature outside an executive session, which is why the board reviewed this in executive session earlier in the year.
Is that the same survey?
Same, yeah.
The information?
Yes, it is.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, no problem. Any other questions? Keep going. Next one is going to be paperwork.
We might as well do paperwork at the end of both. The next one's a 5-minute deal.
Yes, so that one was brief, so he challenged it to be more brief. So here's EE7. Okay, so EE7, I report compliance of the EE7 expectation document as a summary of all EE presentations throughout the duration of the academic calendar. Specifically, community connections have transpired through the linkage meetings and across community communications and emergency communications, such as snow day procedures. Specific topics such as money transfers, reviewing the board of media coverage, extensive monitoring data presented by the executive staff, which you've all seen us do, have fully conveyed the breadth and depth of needed reports. Furthermore, weekend updates combined with personal conversations with the superintendent facilitates connection. Finally, all matters required will continue to be presented on the consent agenda along with the supporting data to convey needed approvals. I will be for compliance. That's that.
So we'll go ahead and build this one down, so I'm going to do it.
And then there's a note just
So before we do the,
And thanks for the Bryce shirts to keep us awake.
Yes, he does.
so before we do the, vote following, Mr. Garrett's presentation, I do need to ask for a motion to accept the presentation as presentations as presented. So,
I'll make that motion.
Second.
roll call.
Austin.
Aye.
Illingworth.
Aye.
Patterson.
Aye.
So now, board members, we will take a moment to fill out the rubric, give a rating, and then we will sign the documents, one for each presentation.
Yes or no?
Has everybody had a chance to fill out the rubric? Thumbs up for this. And Kelly, will you hang on to these and get plugged in these in here? Go ahead. Okay, got mine. Okay, so I believe we are ready to move on to agenda item number 10, which is reports as the superintendent report and the board of education report. Mr. Superintendent.
Kelly's playing video games again. Just kidding. I just have one brief thing. Gateway left some yearbooks on each one of your spaces, and this is just really a good moment for just to look at some really cute faces. And just remember, at the end of the year, these kids remember so much of their journey. And this is kind of that moment. We're in that 5-day period of time where the students are out and they're just signing each other's yearbooks, and you think back to your own story of how you grew up and kind of those memories. My own son had his choir concert tonight. My phone is exploding with Grandma 1 and Grandma 2 sending pictures. Just a really nice celebration inside. You all will be there on Saturday. Fingers crossed, good weather. All lined up, ready to celebrate with our students. And so we spent a lot of time solving a lot of problems, and creating new opportunities for the kids to grow. This is the week for celebrating. So I'd encourage you to celebrate. Thank you for joining us at graduation. Just a good time to take this home with you and just see faces of kids that are having closing out an amazing year. That's it, Mr. Vice President.
So, Superintendent, remind us all about is this the last week of school? Because the high school graduation is on Saturday.
We've got a couple days next week.
Okay.
But truly, it's where teachers are putting grades in and final evaluations, and principals are filling out final evaluations. I'm doing final evaluations on all principals, and so we're in our last, not even 40-yard dash. We're probably in our last. We can see the finish line. Everybody's reaching their neck out, reaching for it right now.
But our kids are coming back next week?
That is correct.
So the high school is doing graduation on Saturday and then actually return?
No, seniors always kind of have this. In fact, I went by the high school today and they had for sale signs plastered all over the outside of the building and inside of the building. It was seniors prank day, senior prank day. And I called over and I said, did anybody not tell me we're selling parts of the high school or what we're doing? Seniors get a buy. They kind of get there early back, or early out. Yes, sir.
Super Chris, do you have anything you wanted to add?
I have a couple of brief things. First of all, Jason and Dell, those shirts really bring out the color in them. Very nice. Also wanted to just let you all know that Danny Bowie, my daughter and former staff member, teacher at the school, just had her second baby today. His name is Benny James.
Nice.
That's really great. And I promised I wouldn't make any announcements about this until she posted it on social media. So it's all official, it's all here. And they are healthy and well, and my number's smart. So I also wanted to mention that in the list of new hires, I recognize some names of folks who are moving back, and so it's really exciting. And I also wanted to just acknowledge a couple of things briefly. I witnessed tonight humility. That's some measure. It's a step, and it's in the right direction. I heard sentences beginning with the words, I apologize, and I'm sorry. And so I wanted to thank both Nate and the staff, as well as this board, for at least orienting towards and moving towards that center, where we can really experience the culture of humility. And I think that's the seedbed for a lot of really good things to do. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Well, then I will humbly, but without apology, but with congratulations to Mr. Austin and his lovely family. Ask if there is a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Roll call.
Austin.
Aye.
Illingworth.
Aye.
Adams. Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you, ladies.
And it will take like 5 hours. So that's exciting. I think it's pretty amazing here in students.